Hello, and welcome to this episode of Things That Matter with me, Martie McNabb. As you know, I never tire from hearing the stories of the things that matter, the things we keep, the things that matter, and the things that we'll leave behind. Um, I probably, at this point, easily have listened to thousands of these stories, and I can't imagine not hearing more stories and asking people about their things that they keep. So, today's guest, I met through a conference this past August in Minneapolis, Minnesota, called the Everything Conference. And as many of you know, I've been connected to the location indie community. As a matter of fact, I think I have their T-shirt on right now, and through the location indie community and Camp Indie, which is their summer camp, I met a lovely woman that both of us know, Vanessa Thorpe. And she ended up co-hosting this amazing conference called the Everything Conference in early August of 2024. And the Everything Conference is for multi-potentialites. So all those people who fight against the idea that they have to pick one thing and get really good at it and get a job doing it. And that is not the people that showed up here. So it was a delightful mix of some people from Location Indie were part of it as well, and other people maybe from the World Domination Summit, people who live, are trying to live fuller lives and not necessarily follow the narrow path of things. So this is how I had the lovely opportunity to meet Risa Zenno as one of the participants. But as we were meeting before we started this recording, I said, I feel like I've known Lisa for a long time. And so I met her there first, but I just so happened to arrive in Albuquerque from Vermont in early December and found out from Lisa reached out on WhatsApp and said she was going to be in New Mexico and could we meet? And so we had a wonderful opportunity to reconnect here. And I found out that she had spent a lot of time in New Mexico. So there were just so many connections. And so I'm delighted to have Lisa as my guest and I look forward to her show and tell. And I'm going to turn the stage over to you now, and you can take it away.
Great. Well, thank you for having me on the show. This is something that I wanted to share at the Everything Conference, but it really came to me where I was listening to other people's stories, and um, the thing that I will share with you all is something that connects me back to my grandmother. And while I was listening to other people's stories, that's where my grieving just happened to happen. I was not expecting that. And by the end of the third speaker at the Everything Conference, I was bawling my eyes out. And I really wanted to share the story, but I wasn't in the place or the state of mind to share after those three stories. And it just, right after the event ended, I reached out to Marty to be like, hey, is there another space that I could share this story? Because I would love to still share. But again, at that Everything Conference, it was just listening to other people's story. It just brought me back to my grandmother. And it was just, again, a really therapeutic way for me to grieve about her. Um, and so, in a nutshell, like, I feel like this storytelling is going to give me an opportunity to kind of share what I wanted to share at that conference that has to do with her. So, like any multi-potentialite, it was really hard for me to choose one thing to bring to the conference, let alone, something that will fit into my backpack or suitcase during the conference. So I was like, okay, what's small enough that I could think and that has a story? So again, like I said, I don't have one thing. So my things are pens. So as you can see, I have probably 20 pens even in this, and I will share with Marty later on a drawer full of stationaries, so pens, um, that I just essentially hoard, I would say, at this point. Um, but so it's really pen, right? And it really brings me back to my grandmother because as a third culture kid, someone that has traveled from one country to another during my developmental years. So I grew up pretty much in Brazil, Seattle, New York, Mexico City uh, before turning 18. And I was born in Japan. And so, where does pen come in? It was really my connection with her in terms of writing letters to each other. Ever since, so she was able to visit us in every country that we lived in. So she came to Brazil, Seattle, New York, Mexico City, everywhere. And throughout that time, this was pre-internet age. So without dating myself necessarily, yeah, it was letter writing. And that's the way that I connected with her. And so um, pens became a thing where also she was an English teacher in Japan. And so she was well known at the stationery that was really close by. And so I'd always get discounts from her because she was a well-known teacher in the neighborhood. And so it was always an opportunity for me also to be like, I want to get the most newest, mechanical pencils. And this, again, I'm biased, but I feel like Japanese stationaries are the best. And so whenever I had to get gifts from my friends back home, I would always buy it there, right? And so um, she'd always get me the discounts, and then I'd always bring back the coolest, like erasers or mechanical pencils or the colorful pens or whatnots. But essentially, the pen was a way for me to stay connected with her. And then I also feel that I work in education now, and again, she was an English teacher, and we both share the same initials. Uh, as Marty mentioned, it's pronounced Lisa, but it is spelled with an R. So I always say I'm Lisa with an R. um, and so my initials RZ is also her name. Her name was Ruriko Zenno. And so we share the RZ. And I remember when I was a child, um, I used to edit her papers and her speeches that she used to do for her classmates or her students. And she used to tell me, "Oh, nobody will notice because we share the same initials anyway, so it's fine." And so I was like, okay. And I would recommend books that she should read. And so again, literature, words, the sharings. I did share eventually for her to how to use the internet and the email. So we did move on from letter writing to emails back in the day. But um, until then, right, it was really the pens that connected us. And it was my way of connecting with her um, from so far away. And it was the one constant that we did. And I would always write to her in English. So again, there was like a communal language between her and I. And yeah, it just to this day, I always think, wow, like it's just a pen, but I have so many pens, and we would always just talk about how, this one's really good for taking notes, especially when I went to college, and um, I was very particular about the colors of my pens. For my note taking, I always use blue, never black. I don't know why. And she was always the ones for correcting things, she'll always use red. And I was like, I don't like red. I don't want you to correct my things with red. I feel like red definitely has some traumatic moments in my childhood of getting things, wrong on the test or whatever. And so I was like, when you correct my paper, would you do it in another color? So that's what, she would do. And yeah, it's essentially, I still love pens and coloring or, just again, that that stationary feel. I often watch Japanese documentaries, and it sounds like a lot of people go specifically to Japan for their stationery. And it just, whenever I hear about that, I'm just like, I know exactly what that means. I was so fortunate to have been exposed to that from a really young age. I'll also tell a story, again, not really pens, but more mechanical pencil. Um, the day that I realized that I think it was H1B lead is the same as the number two pencil here in the States, I was ecstatic. I was just like so excited that I was like, I never have to use the number two pencil ever again. I just don't know why, but I don't. Well, I don't like the eraser on the number two pen. It just ruins everything that you wrote. And so I always used my mono eraser from Japan, and then also again the mechanical pencil or the pens that my grandmother would either recommend or again the things that I would find at the store that she had connections with. So that's my thing or things, I guess. And it just became, and I still like from time to time just think about that. Like, what pen am I holding and what pen story comes up for that? You know, what period in my life did I use that kind of pen? Because it definitely shifted as, I took more notes and notes, and I'm a comm major, so I wrote a lot of papers in college. And so I went from, the ink, the gel inks, and then like the ballpoint and just different things in different types of inks and, whether you can erase it, whether you can't erase it. So yeah, pens have always been this thing that always reminds me of her, and I I I cherish that now. Now that she's gone, she's like, wow, she's always around me because I'm always around
Pens.
stationery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love stationary stories.
Mhm.
You're, though I have to say, you're the first person that has talked about pens in relation to a connection with handwritten notes or
Mhm.
letters to your grandmother. I had
Yeah.
somebody talk about it for being a writer. So they
Mhm.
brought a pen or a pencil, I think it was a pencil actually, and talked about that. But this is the first, and one of my themes, my 26 themes of show and tales is cards, letters, and thank you notes. So
Mhm.
maybe I'm sure you've kept a few of your letters from your grandmother, and I'm sure she kept yours as well. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I got to visit Japan last year to really say our goodbyes, and I was actually thinking about that. It's been a year since that. And ironically, another friend of mine is doing a project, and after this podcast, I was actually going to write a letter to my grandmother to do
oh,
kind of full circle moment of like, I just went on a podcast talking about pens with you, about you, and now I'm writing a letter to you. So again, it's
oh,
been a really grieving process for me,
yeah,
but um,
yeah,
it's funny how it becomes full circle in some
yeah.
ways. So
Oh, wow. Well, and I'm glad that, I mean, it took us a while. Unfortunately, on my part, I was dropping the ball a lot. Um,
no worries.
in my caregiving responsibilities this year, it kind of overwhelmed me. But I'm so glad that we were able to do this. And yeah, it was. I loved you talking about the Everything Conference and how when I did a group things that matter session,
Hmm.
story sharing session. It was the biggest thing was encouraging people to bring something that they could, who are multi-potentialites,
Right.
pick one thing, and then also to like have it be small enough for them to travel with.
Exactly.
Right. So it's a really, but with you and a pen, that was easier.
But
Coming.
of course, I didn't bring just one pen, right? I brought like eight.
Well, not. 100 or
Well, no, 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 no. I definitely minimized it, but I was like, which ones do I bring to,
uh,
to show and tell? So, yeah.
yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. And it was my first, you experienced my first uh time where I ended up having everybody break up into small groups
Hmm.
as well, instead of doing it one at a time. And it seemed like to go beautifully. And I'm glad
Yes.
that, it provided you that moment of, um, like you said, therapeutic, like grieving part of the process, but that you also ended up saying, I need to share the story. And now you're sharing the story. And
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
think, yeah, and you mentioned this before this podcast, but it is the storytelling, the listening piece, and then the telling piece. Because I think all in all, it comes full circle. Because other things that people talk about reminded me of things that I did with my grandmother. And
yeah,
that's what made me ball out, right, during that moment. And it was, again, a very therapeutic thing because I wasn't talking about her necessarily, but everybody else was talking about a story that related so much back to me. And
yeah.
so, yeah, it was just a full circle moment, and I knew I had to get the story out. So glad we were able to do this.
Me too. And we were able to meet up in New Mexico in
Yes,
Albuquerque, when were here in December. And I'll look forward to putting this, out in the world as well. So
great.
my follow-up question,
Yes.
is always, and I didn't know that it was hundreds of things. But my question to you is, have you considered what you would like to have happen to these things that matter when you're dead and gone?
Yeah, I mean, I think it connects to writing. Um, but my all-time, I don't know if it's a bucket list necessarily or a to-do list, but it is storytelling. And I have wondered if I would write a book someday, whether it be a ghostwriter or just RZ, maybe just initials, but to tell my story. And so I'm hoping, I mean, the pens might disappear. I don't really care for it that much, but maybe my stories would live on in one way or another. So that is something I hope could pan out. Probably not within the next decade, but something that, yeah, again, has been on my mind for a while.
So cool. Let's see. Let me go there. Okay. Well, that's your legacy, and
Hmm.
in essence, it's sort of like carrying on the legacy of your grandmother as well.
Right. Yeah.
And
Hmm.
one other question, because you brought it up,
Sure.
I'm going to ask. So when you talk about stationery, you said Japanese stationery,
Hmm.
it, when how does that compare to when I talk about stationery stores here in the US? Is there similarities, very different? That was a curiosity of mine.
I mean, it's a lot cuter, I think, in Japan. I mean, I was a little kid. There's just a lot more variety,
Yeah.
right? As multi-potentialites, we love options. And I also was very particular about feeling. So feel or touches of paper, for example.
Yeah.
I recently watched a documentary of how they make the dictionaries in Japan and
Ah,
how like paper width is a huge thing.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
how easy is it to go through the pages
Yeah.
and how, that touch and um yeah, it was mind-boggling to just be like, wow, the, the precision of like building a dictionary. But of course I digress. But going back to stationery, yeah, it's just more like cutesy stuff. I think
Ah,
again, it's just a lot more options, and I never had a good moment with American stationery. Like I said, like the number two pencil erasers, like
yeah.
no offense to the people who designed that thing, but like, can we update it? Like those erasers never erased good, in my opinion.
Nope.
And so I always had, my erasers from Japan that I would like, it would not rip apart my paper, right? Or like make black streaks. Like it's like, I don't know, just different quality assurances, I guess. And
Yeah.
so,
Oh,
um, yeah,
I love that.
that was my biggest thing. And again, I used stationery as an advantage. So like my parents never said no to educational things. And so, I would be like, I need these pen because it's gonna help me take better notes or, whatever advantage that I came up with or an excuse, they were like, oh yeah, sure. Right.
I
And so
love that.
I was able to a lot of the yeah, a lot of the presents or a lot of things I bought as a kid when I was little were stationary
Yeah.
things. Again, for
Oh,
that reason.
I love it. Oh my
Yeah.
God, I love it. I need this, Mom. I need
Right.
this,
Like,
Dad.
it's so writable. And it's just like, you want me to do better in school, right? And so, and ironically, though, I mean, I majored in communication, so I would write a lot of papers down the
Right.
road, but I never, who knew that like what I would want when I was 4 would eventually tell a story of where I would end up. So,
Right.
yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, in a lot of ways, I think it does, right? I think that
Yeah.
so many of us have that, that what filled us with joy when we were young. Um, uh, Either we stay in it or it shows up eventually in our
Right.
lives,
Exactly.
right? You know,
Yep.
and I just love you talking about the dictionary thing too, and the weight of paper and the thickness and all of that kind of stuff. And that is why, like, I I have to say that, things don't matter. It's not that the thing matters. It's that there's there's something about tactilely,
Mhm.
holding something, feeling
Right.
something, the feeling its weight. So it's like, the wooden spoon that your grandmother always used when she was cooking, when
Right. Right.
making, or that, the pens or the stationery that you used and or that you inherited, and that you realize that they touched the same thing that you're touching,
Right.
right? And
Right.
that you were bonded over all those miles through paper and pen,
Hmm.
that's, and yeah, it's I love I love this story, and I'm so glad that we were able to jump on and capture it. So this is a time where I invite you to share with my listeners how, more about you and how people can learn more about your work and or your future writing and work. How can they follow you as I know you don't do one thing. This is the problem when I'm
Right.
interviewing
Right.
people for most.
For sure.
I'm usually like, can you pick two things and I'll put them in the show notes and then follow this and go there to find out all the other things that you do. Because yeah, so I am going to turn this over to you and let you share with the listeners.
Yeah, I mean, one place you could find me is definitely LinkedIn, Risazenno, my full name, or you could find me at tcklisa, Lisa, at gmail.com. And you'll find TCK Lisa in different platforms, Instagram and other places also. So if you want to connect, I'm happy always to get on the call to talk things deep, and just see where our tangents takes us. Because yeah, I as a multi-potentialite, my stories can go way different places.
I love where our tangents can take us.
Right, exactly.
I think that should be
Exactly.
your tagline, Lisa.
Where the tangents take us, yeah.
I think that's it would be a fabulous one. I'd be curious enough to, investigate more if I heard if that was your tagline. I'd be like,
Hmm.
who is this
What
person?
is this? Yeah. What does
And
she do?
what'd she do? I'd be fascinating. Well, I'm fascinated anyways. So, and I encourage anybody to reach out because, as I'm sure you could tell in this interview, in this conversation, that your time with Lisa would be amazing. So I encourage you to do that. And I thank everyone for tuning in and listening or watching to this episode of Things That Matter with Martie McNabb. If you have a business or a organization of volunteers, or and you're looking for ways to build deeper connections within your team, your volunteers, your donors, even, you want that more feeling of that they're working as a team and connected, please reach out to me so that I can host a Things That Matter show and tales for your company or organization and nonprofit. You can email me at marty@showandtails.com. And thank you so much, Lisa, for joining me and sharing your grandmother's story. It was such a pleasure. Always wonderful spending time with you.
Likewise. Thank you.
Take good care.
Bye.
Bye.